Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a historical battle where the sheer mathematics of war completely broke down. We're traveling back to the 8th year of the Hijri calendar, leaving the peaceful streets of Medina for the scorching deserts of the Levant. We're going to look at an engagement that honestly still baffles military generals to this very day. It's this incredible story of absolute defiance, where logic dictated a total massacre, but tactical brilliance completely rewrote the ending. Now, I want you to really think about this number. Imagine being one single soldier staring down 66 fully armed enemy combatants. Let that sink in for a second. Just visualize stepping onto a battlefield, and for every person standing next to you, the enemy has a literal crowd of heavily armed warriors waiting to strike. In military terms, this isn't just an underdog scenario. Mathematically speaking, it's considered absolute suicide. To give you the exact figures, we're looking at a tiny Medina army of just 3,000 men facing off against a staggering 200,000 troops. This massive coalition was split down the middle. 100,000 soldiers from the era's superpower, the Roman Byzantine Empire, under Emperor Heraclius, plus another 100,000 warriors from allied Arab tribes like the Lechem and Jadam. The Medina army had marched a grueling distance, arriving totally exhausted, only to find an ocean of steel and armor just waiting for them. Part 1. A broken diplomatic law. So why did this suicide mission even happen? Well, to understand that, we have to look at the catalyst. Even in the ancient world, among the bitterest of enemies, spilling the blood of an innocent ambassador was an unforgivable violation of global law. You just didn't do it. Yet when envoy Harith bin Umair was sent peacefully by Prophet Muhammad with a letter to the ruler of Basra, he was intercepted by a Roman puppet governor named Shurabil bin Amr. Shurabil just turned him away. He had the envoy tied up and brutally executed. This wasn't just a crime. It was a direct, unavoidable declaration of war against Medina. The prophet was deeply grieved, and he immediately ordered a response. But here's what's truly wild, and it brilliantly illustrates the strict moral framework set by Prophet Muhammad before those 3,000 soldiers even marched out. Despite the deep anger over the murdered envoy, this was absolutely not a mission of blind vengeance. He explicitly commanded them not to harm non-combatants. No women, no children, no elderly. They were strictly forbidden from bothering monks in their monasteries, and they couldn't even cut down a green tree. It's a fascinating look at the foundations of modern rules of engagement, laid out centuries ago, demanding ultimate discipline even in the face of brutal provocation. Moving on to Part 2, the fall of the three commanders. When the Medina army finally arrived in the region of Ma'an in Jordan, spies delivered horrifying news. There was a 200,000-strong coalition waiting for them. The shock was palpable. Naturally, many wanted to halt, suggesting, maybe we send a letter back to Medina and ask for new orders given these impossible odds. But the third in command, Abdullah bin Rawaha, stood up. He reminded them they didn't march out relying on numbers or weapons, saying, "You are seeking martyrdom. We only fight with this deen." Instantly, the fear vanished. It was replaced by a resounding chant of Allahu Akbar, and those 3,000 men charged straight into a sea of 200,000. This is where things get incredibly intense. This traces the rapid, fatal succession of the three appointed commanders once they hit the enemy lines. First up was Zayd bin Haritha, who took the flag and fought fiercely until he was pierced by dozens of enemy spears. Before the flag could even hit the ground, Ja'far bin Abi Talib grabbed it. A Roman soldier severed his right hand, so he grabbed it with his left. When his left hand was severed, he used his bleeding arms and chest to keep the banner raised, famously suffering over 90 wounds before he finally fell. And then Abdullah bin Rawaha took up the flag, plunged into the Roman ranks, and was also killed. Just like that, the three designated leaders were gone. Part 3. Enter the sword of Allah. With the commanders gone and the flag in the dirt, the situation was completely unraveling. Total panic. The Romans were closing in to trample the banner. In this absolute do-or-die moment, a veteran soldier named Thabit bin Akram snatches the flag and practically forces Khalid bin Walid to take charge as their only hope. Khalid immediately shifts the strategy. Looking at this impossible situation, he decides that playing defense is just going to lead to a slow massacre. So he pivots to extreme offense. He fights with such relentless, blinding speed and force that he physically breaks 9 swords in close-quarters combat in a single day. 9 swords, shattered against Roman armor just trying to keep his men alive. This specific detail perfectly captures the sheer ferocity required to just keep that massive Roman army at bay until the sun went down. Out of his entire arsenal, only one sturdy Yemeni sword remained intact. See, Khalid wasn't trying to win the battle that day. He was simply buying time. He pushed the Romans back just enough to prevent the total annihilation of his 3,000 men before darkness finally forced both sides to retreat back to their camps. Which brings us to part 4, a masterclass in psychological warfare. Once night fell, Khalid realized a grim truth. They couldn't survive another day of direct combat. The sheer fatigue and numerical disadvantage would crush them by sunrise. So, while the Romans slept, he engineered a massive illusion. First, he took soldiers from the right flank and moved them all the way to the left. Then, he took the exhausted troops at the front and swapped them with the men in the back. Finally, he sent a small detachment of cavalry behind the hills with very specific orders: kick up massive clouds of dust and make an incredible amount of noise as soon as the sun comes up. Put yourself in the shoes of a Roman soldier the next morning. You wake up fully expecting to easily finish off the exhausted remnants of this tiny army. Instead, you look across the battlefield and see entirely unfamiliar faces. The banners are different, the armor is different, and right behind them, a massive dust cloud is rising into the sky, accompanied by terrifying noise. Despite having 200,000 men, the Roman coalition was terrified. They genuinely believed fresh thousands of reinforcements had just arrived all the way from Medina. And finally, part 5, rebranding the strategic retreat. Capitalizing on this paralyzing fear, Khalid executed a highly disciplined backward march. The Romans, absolutely convinced that this newly reinforced army was trying to trick them into a deadly ambush in the deep desert, were way too scared to pursue. Khalid literally walked his men right out of the jaws of death. But the return home wasn't exactly a victory parade. Heartbreakingly, when the surviving troops made it back to Medina, some of the locals didn't understand the military miracle that had just occurred. They threw dirt on the soldiers and mocked them, chanting "Farar," which means those who flee or abandon the battlefield. I mean, imagine surviving a 66-1 nightmare, watching your commanders die, and then your own people treat you like a coward. But the prophet stepped right in and immediately reframed the narrative. He shut down the insults entirely. He told the crowd, "They are not Farar. They are Karar." Now, Karar means those who tactically retreat so they can live to strike again. He defined their survival against a 66-1 disadvantage not as cowardice, but as a masterful strategic victory. Because, preserving the army to fight another day is sometimes the absolute hardest and most vital military maneuver of all. So it really leaves us with this fascinating final thought about how true military genius is often about knowing exactly when to bend the rules of engagement and simply survive. Khalid bin Walid proved that sheer numbers don't always dictate the outcome. Sometimes a broken sword and a brilliant illusion are enough to defeat an empire. So ask yourself, in the face of insurmountable odds, is victory always about the destruction of your enemy, or is it sometimes about the absolute defiance of walking away alive? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.